Hi, Freddie. This is chapter 7. This is probably my favorite chapter, and it's called The Sorting Hat. Um, Once again, if you have any post-its, take little notes, jot down. Try to figure out which house that you would belong to, um, and enjoy. Chapter 7. The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired witch in an emerald green robe stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry's first thought that was that she was not somebody to cross. The first year's Professor McGonagall, said Hagrid. Thank you, Hagrid. I will take it from here. She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big you could have fit the whole um, Dursley's house in it. The stone wall was lit with flaming torches, like the ones at Gringotts. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led the way upward to the upper floors. They followed Professor Gunagor. Boy, I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time today. McGonagall across the flagged stone floor. Harry could hear the drone of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. The rest of the school must have already been here, but Professor McGonagall showed the first years into a small empty chamber off the hall. They crowded in, standing rather closer together than they would usually have done, peering about nervously. Welcome to Hogwarts, said Professor McGonagall. The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The four houses are called uh, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its noble history, and each house produces outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose your house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is rewarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will be a credit to whatever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting. Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. I shall return when we are all ready for you, said Professor McGonagall. Please wait quietly. She left the chamber, and Harry swallowed. How exactly do we get sorted into houses? He asked Ron. Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking. Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. A test in front of the whole school? But he didn't know any magic yet. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected something like this the moment they arrived. He looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking except maybe Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she had learned and wondering which one she needed. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous. Never, not even when he had to take home a school report home to the Dursleys, saying that he had somehow turned his teacher's wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall will come back and lead him into his doom. Then something happened that made him jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. "What the?" he gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts were just streaming through the back wall. Pearly white, pearly white, and slightly transparent, they glided across the room, talking to one another and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forget and forgive, I say. We ought to give him a second chance." "My dear friar, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad name, and you know he's not really even a ghost." "I say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose." A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony is about to start." Professor Grimmadour had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now form a line," Professor Grimmadour told the first years, "and follow me." Feeling oddly as though his legs had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind the boy with the sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the great hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid place. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that were floating in mid-air over four-legged tables, where the rest of the students were sitting. There were tables laden with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here, so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them like looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver, mainly to avoid all the staring eyes. Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched. It's to look like the sky outside. I read about it in the Hogwarts, a history." It was hard to believe there was a ceiling there at all, and that the great hall didn't simply open up to the heavens. Harry quickly looked down at Professor Grammagle, silently placing a four-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have left that into the house. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. That seemed the sort of thing. Noticing that everyone in the hall was staring at the hat, he stared at it too. For a few seconds there was a complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide, like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but I don't judge on what you see. I eat myself if you could find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hats sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see. So try me on, and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong to Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong to Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal, Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and and unafraid of toil. Are yet the wise old Ravenclaws, if you're a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps a Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Their cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm the thinking cap. The whole house burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the four tables, then became quite still again. So we'll just going to try on the hat, Ron whispered to Harry. I'll kill Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll. Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on the hat is a lot better than having to do a spell. But he did wish they could have tried it on without everybody watching. The hat seems to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or anything at the moment. If only that he had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy, that would have been the one for him. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, she said. Abbott, Hannah, a pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails, stumbled out of line, put on the hat, which fell down over her eyes, and sat down. A moment's pause. Huff and puff, um, uh, shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down at the Hufflepuff's table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat friar waving merrily at her. Bones, Sarah, Hufflepuff, shouted the hat again, and Sarah scooted off to sit next to Hannah. Boots, Terry, Ravenclaw. The table second to the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up and shook hands with Terry as he joined them. Brocklehurst, Mandy went to Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first Gryffindor, and the table on the far right exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron's twin brothers catcalling. Bulstrode Millicent then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination. After all, he'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked an unpleasant lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for teams during gym at his old school. He had always been the last to be chosen, not because he was not good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Finch, Fickley, Justin, Hufflepuff. Sometimes Harry noticed the hat shouted out the house at once, but at others it took a little while to decide. Finnegan, Seamus, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before he declared a Gryffindor. Granger, Hermione. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor, shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry. A horrible thought always do when you're very, very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there and the hat over his eyes until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said that they obviously made a mistake and he'd better get back on the train. Then Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toad, was called. He fell over on his way to the stool. The hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted Gryffindor, Neville ran off wearing it, and had to jog back with glees of laughter to give it to MacDowell Morgan. Malfoy swaggered forward when his name was called and got his wish at once. The hat barely touched his head when it shouted, Slytherin. Malfoy went to join his friends, um, Crabbe and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Moon, Knot, Perkinson, a pair of twin girls, Patile, then Perks, Sally Ann, and then at last Potter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hisses firing all over the hall. Potter? Did she say? The Harry Potter? The last thing Harry saw before the hat drooped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said the small voice in his ear. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh, my goodness, yes. And a nice twist to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edges of the stool and thought, Not Slytherin, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be good. You know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on your way to greatness. No doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor! Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily towards Gryffindor's table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not put into Slytherin, he hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy, the prefect, got up and shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins yelled, We got Potter! We got Potter! Harry sat down opposite the ghost in the rough he'd seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry a sudden horrible feeling he'd just plunged into a bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him was Hagar, who caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there, in the center of the high table, in a large gold chair, sat Albus Dumbledore. Harry recognized him at once from the card he had gotten out of the chocolate frogs on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as brightly as the ghost. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell, too, the nervous young man with the um, leaky cauldron. He was looking very peculiar in a large purple turban. And now there were only 3 people left to be sorted. Thomas Dean, a black boy, even taller than Ron, joined Harry at the Gryffindor table. Turpin Lisa became a Ravenclaw, and there was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his fingers around under the table, and a second later he had shouted, Gryffindor! The hat shouted, Gryffindor! Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. Well done, Ron. Excellent, said Percy Weasley across Harry as Zaboni Blaze was made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realized how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasty seemed ages ago. Albus Dumbledore had got up to his feet. He'd been beaming at the students, his arms open wide as if he could have been if he could have pleased him more than to see them all there. Welcome, he said. Welcome to the new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquets, I would like to say a few words. And there and here they are. Nitwit, blunder, obblement, tweak. Thank you. He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. He a bit mad? He asked Percy uncertainly. Mad? Said Percy airily. He's a genius, best wizard in the world. But he is a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry? Harry's mouth fell open. The dishes in front of him were now piled with food. He'd never seen so many things he'd like to eat on, on a table. Roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, bacon, and steak, boiled potatoes, fries, Yorkshire puddings, peas, carrots, gravies, ketchup, and for some strange reasons, peppermint humbugs. The Dursleys had never exactly starved Harry, but he had never been allowed to eat as much as he liked. Dudley had always taken anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything except the peppermint, and began to eat. It was all delicious. That does look good, said the ghost in the ruff sadly, watching Harry cut up his steak. Can't you? I haven't eaten in nearly 400 years, said the ghost. I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. I'm Sir Nicholas de Minsley Porpenton, at your service, resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower. I know who you are, said Ron suddenly. My brothers told me about you. You're nearly headless Nick. I would prefer you call me Sir Nicholas de Monsley. The ghost began stiffly, but the sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. Nearly headless? How could that be? How could you be nearly headless? Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as if their little chat wasn't going at all the way he wanted. Like this, he said irritably. He seized his left ear and pulled. His head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder, as if it was on a hinge. Somebody had obviously tried to behead him, but not but have not done it properly. Looking pleased at the stunned looks on the faces, nearly headless Nick flipped his head back onto his neck, coughed, and said, So, new Gryffindors, I'm hoping you're going to help us win the house championship this year. Gryffindors have never gone as long without winning. Slytherins have got the cup 6 years in a row. The bloody Baron's becoming almost unbearable. He's the Slytherin's ghost. Harry looked over at the Slytherin's table and saw the horrible ghost sitting there with a bleak, staring eyes, a gaunt face, and robes stained with silver blood. He was right next to Malfoy, who Harry was pleased to see didn't look too pleased with the seating arrangements. How did he get covered in blood? Asked Seamus with great interest. I'd never asked, said nearly headless Nick delicately. When everybody had eaten as much as they could, the remains of the food faded from the plates, leaving them sparkly clean as before. A moment later, the desserts arrived, blocks of ice cream, every flavor they could ever think of, apple pies, um, trincle tarts, chocolate eclairs, and jam donuts, trifles, berries, jello, rice pudding, as Harry helped himself to a treacle tart. The talk turned to their families. I'm a half and half, said Seamus. Me dad's a Muggle. Mom didn't tell him she was a witch until after they married. A bit of a shock for him. The others laughed. What about you, Neville? Said Ron. Well, my grand brought me up, and she's a witch, said Neville. But the family thought I was all muggle for ages. My great uncle, um, RG, kept trying to catch me off guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me off the edge of a black pool pier once. I nearly drowned, but nothing had happened until I was 8. Great Uncle LG came around for dinner, and he was hanging me out of an upstairs window by the ankle when my great auntie Edel offered him a meringue. He accidentally let go, but I bounced all the way down the garden into the road. They were all really pleased. Gran was crying. She was so happy, and you should have seen their faces when I got in here. They thought I might not have enough magic to come, you see. Great Uncle Argy was so pleased he brought me my toad. On Harry's other side, Percy Wesley and Hermione were talking about lessons. I do hope that they'll start right away. There's so much to learn. I'm particularly interested in transfiguration. You know, turning something into something else, of course. It's supposed to be a very, very difficult. You'll be starting small, just matches into needles and that sort of thing. Harry, who was starting uh, to feel warm and sleepy, looked up at the high table again. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblets. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quill, in his uh, absurd turban, was talking to the teacher with gray, greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and a shallow skin. It happened very suddenly. The hook-nosed teacher looked past Quibbles' turban straight into Harry's eyes, and a sharp, hot pain came across Harry's forehead, the scar on Harry's forehead. Ouch! Harry clasped the hand to his head. What is it? Said Percy. Nothing. The pain had gone as quickly as it had come. Harder to shake off was a feeling that Harry had gotten from the teacher's look, a feeling that he didn't like Harry at all. Who's the teacher talking to Professor Quill? He asked Percy. Oh, you know Quill's already, do you? No wonder he's looking so nervous. That's Professor Snipes. He teaches potions, but he doesn't want to. Everyone knows he's after Quill's job. Knows an awful lot about the dark arts, Snape. Harry watched Snape for a while, but Snape didn't look at him again. At last, the desserts disappeared, and Professor Dumbledore got to his feet. The hall fell silent. Hmm, just a few more words. Now that we are all fed and watered, I have a few start of the term notices to give. First years should note that the forest on the grounds is forbidden to all people, and a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well. Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the directions of the Weasley twins. I have also been asked by Mr. Flitch, the caregivers, to remind you all that no magic should be used between the classes in the corridor. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of term. Anyone interested in playing for their house teams should contact Madam Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year the third floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death. Harry laughed, but he was one of the few who did. He's not serious. He's not serious, he muttered to Percy. Must be, said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. It's odd, because he usually gives a reason why we're not allowed to go somewhere. The forest full of dangerous beasts, everyone knows that. I do think he might have told us. Prefix, at least. And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song, cried Dumbledore. Harry noticed that the other teachers' smiles had begun rather fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick, as if he was trying to get a fly off the end, and a long gold ribbon flew out of it, which rose high above the tables and twisted itself snake-like into words. "Everyone pick your favorite tune," said Dumbledore, "and off we go." And the school song bellowed, "Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy Warty, Hogwarts, teach us something, please, whether we be old or bold, or young and wobbly knees. Our heads could do with some filling, with some interesting stuff. Now we're having full of air, dead flies and bits of fluff. So teach us things worth knowing. Bring back what we forgot. Just do your best, and we'll do the rest, and learn until our brains all rot." Everyone finished the song at different times. At last, only the Weasley twins were left singing along to a very slow funeral march. Dumbledore conducted their last few lines with his wand, and when they'd finished, he was the one of those who clapped the loudest. "Oh, music," he said, wiping his eyes, "a magic behind all we do here. And now, bedtime. Off you trot." The Gryffindor first year, um, followed Percy through the chattering crowds, out the great hall, and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were like lead again, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in the portraits along the corridor whispered and pointed to their passing, or that Percy had led them through doorways hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestry. They climbed more staircases, yawning and dragging their feet. Harry was just wondering how much further that they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking sticks were floating in mid-air behind them, and as Percy took a step towards them, they started throwing themselves at him. "Peeves!" Percy whispered to the first years. "It's a poltergeist." He raised his voice. "Peeves, show yourself!" A loud root sound, like the air being let out of a balloon, answered. "Do you want me to go to the Bloody Barons?" There was a pop, and a little man with wicked dark eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating cross-legged in the air, clutching the walking sticks. "Oh," he said with an even cackle. "Icky firsties, what fun!" He swished suddenly at them. They all ducked. "Go away, Peeves, or the Baron will hear about all this. I mean it," barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, dropping the walking sticks on Neville's head. They heard him zooming around, clattering coats of arms as he passed. "You want to watch out for Peeves," said Percy, as they set off again. "The Bloody Baron's the only one who can control him. He won't even listen to us prefects. Here we are." At the end of the hall corridor hung a portrait of a very fat woman in a pink silk dress. "Password," she said. "Captain Dorcas," said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. Neville needed a leg up, and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cozy room full of squishy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitory, and the boys through another. At the top of the spiral staircase, they were obviously in one of the towers. They found their beds at last. 5 four-posters hung with deep red velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been brought up. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. Great food, isn't it? Ron muttered to Harry through the hangings. Get off, Scrabbers! He's chewing my sheets. Harry was going to ask Ron if he'd had any of the treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much, because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Grill's turban, which kept him talking, which kept talking to him, telling him he must transfer to Slytherin at once because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't want to be a Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. He tried to pull it off, but it tightened painfully. And then, as Malfoy laughing at him as he struggled with it, then Malfoy turned into a hooked-nosed teacher Snape, whose laugh became high and cold. There was a burst of green light, and Harry woke up sweating and shaking. He rolled over and fell asleep again, and when he awoke the next day, he didn't remember the dream at all. Okay, like I said, that was a good chapter. I always liked that one. I liked that part, this last part about his dream. Was that really a dream, or was that like Snape getting into his dreams and telling him he should be a Slytherin, that he belongs in the Slytherin? Because remember, the hat said that he should be a Slytherin also. And what do you think? Do you think that you were? What would you have been? I honestly thought that I would have been a Hufflepuff, because I'm not afraid of hard work, and I think I'm pretty loyal. That's what I think I would have been. I think I would have put you there too, because I think you're pretty loyal, and I don't think you're afraid of hard work at all. So that's the end of chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed it.